Abigail woke up screaming for the fourth time this week. Her body was drenched in sweat. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it wanted to escape her chest, and her hands could still feel the sensation of ice-cold water, the water pulling her down, the water that killed her, the same nightmare, always the same. Ever since she was 5 years old, a man drowning, giant waves, a raging storm, and her swimming desperately to reach him, grabbing him, pulling him toward the surface. And then, just when she finally succeeded, when she could finally breathe a sigh of relief, a bigger wave would crash down, snatching him from her arms and dragging her down into the depths. The worst part wasn't dying. The worst part was his look. The look of despair as he watched her sink. The scream that never reached her ears because the water had already flooded her lungs. And the last thing she saw before waking up, his hand reaching out to her, always reaching, never succeeding. Abigail was 31 years old. She had already consulted psychologists, psychiatrists, neurologists. She had undergone tests of every kind. She had tried sleeping pills, alternative therapies, hypnosis. Nothing worked. The nightmare persisted, every night, without fail, like a cruel reminder of something she couldn't understand. If you've ever had a dream so real that you woke up with your heart racing, as if you had actually lived it, then this video will change everything you think about the nature of dreams. That Monday morning, Abigail had a job interview. Not just any job. It was the opportunity she needed to finally escape the cramped room in the boarding house where she'd been living for years. A position as a housekeeper at a seaside estate. Excellent salary. Room and board included. Everything she had ever wanted. The employment agency had been clear. The Blackwood family was very traditional. Owners of a shipping company that had existed for centuries. Wealthy, discreet, and extremely demanding. The previous housekeeper had retired after 30 years of service. They needed someone trustworthy. Abigail got ready carefully, a simple but elegant dress, hair pulled back, light makeup. She tried to ignore the deep circles under her eyes that the nightmares left on her face. She tried to smile at her reflection, tried to look like someone who slept well, someone normal. The taxi dropped her off in front of an imposing iron gate. Behind it, a gravel driveway led to a white mansion facing the sea. The sound of the waves reached all the way up there, and for a moment, just a moment, Abigail felt a chill run down her spine. The sea. She was afraid of the sea. Ever since she was a child, she never understood why. She had never drowned, never had any traumatic experiences with water, but the fear was there, deep, inexplicable, as if her body knew something that her mind refused to remember. She ignored the chill, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door. The housekeeper who answered the door was friendly. She guided Abigail through hallways decorated with old paintings, most of them showing ships and maritime scenes. The Blackwood family was proud of their naval history. Every generation had commanded vessels. Every generation had conquered the seas. The interview would be with the head of the house, Richard Blackwood, 42 years old, heir to the shipping empire, a widower for 5 years. He lived alone in the mansion, except for his older brother Marcus, who occupied the east wing. Abigail was led to an office filled with books and old maps. Huge windows overlooked the ocean, and behind a mahogany desk, with his back to her, stood a man looking out at the sea. "Mr. Blackwood, your interviewee has arrived," the housekeeper announced. The man turned around, and Abigail's world crumbled. It was him, the man from her nightmares. The same face, the same eyes, the same expression, not similar, not alike. It was him. The man she had watched drown every night since she was 5 years old. The man she had tried to save. The man in whose arms she died. Abigail felt her legs weaken. The room spun. The sound of the waves outside became deafening. and the last thing she saw before everything went dark was his worried expression as he rushed to catch her. When she woke up, she was lying on a sofa. Someone had placed a pillow under her head, and the face of the man from her nightmares was inches from hers, with an expression of genuine concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was exactly as it was in her dreams. Deep, comforting, and terribly familiar. Abigail tried to sit up. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I never faint. You suddenly went pale, as if you'd seen a ghost." A ghost. If he only knew. If he had any idea that she had watched him die every night for 26 years. "I'm fine now," she lied. "It was just, I guess I didn't eat properly this morning. Interview nerves. Sorry for the inconvenience." Richard Blackwood watched her for a long moment. There was something in his gaze, something Abigail couldn't identify, as if he was also trying to remember something, as if she also seemed familiar to him somehow. "Would you like a glass of water?" "Yes, please." As he turned to get the water, Abigail tried to calm her breathing. She tried to think rationally. This was madness, pure madness. Dreams were just dreams. They weren't premonitions. They weren't memories of past lives. They were nothing more than random synapses in the brain during sleep. But then why had she dreamed of this specific man her entire life? Why did she recognize every feature of his face as if she had known him for centuries? Why was her heart beating not from fear, but from something much deeper, something that felt like longing? "Here you go." Richard returned with a glass of water. "Drink it slowly." Their hands touched when Abigail took the glass. And in the instant of contact, she saw it. A flash, an image, a scene that was not from this time. She was wearing old-fashioned clothes. He was too. They were on a pier. There was a ship in the background, and he was holding her hands exactly as he was now, saying words she couldn't hear, but that made her heart ache. Abigail pulled her hand back so quickly that she almost spilled the water. "Are you all right?" Richard asked. Yes, sorry, it's just, your hands are cold." They weren't. They were warm, too warm, as if his touch burned her in a way that transcended the physical. "Look." Richard sat down in the armchair opposite her. "I understand you must be nervous. This mansion can be intimidating, but I've read your resume. Your references are excellent, and honestly, I have a good feeling about you." A good feeling. Abigail almost laughed. She had a feeling she was about to relive her own death. "If you still want the job," he continued, "it's yours. You can start tomorrow. The housekeeper's quarters are in the west wing, overlooking the gardens, not the sea." Why not the sea exactly? Because the previous housekeeper had a fear of the water. Thought maybe you might too. The way you looked at the ocean when you arrived seemed terrified. Abby swallowed hard. He'd noticed something she'd been trying to hide for decades. "I have a bit of discomfort with the sea," she admitted. "Nothing serious, it won't interfere with my work." Discomfort, that was the understatement of the century. She had absolute terror. Terror she couldn't explain. Terror that now made perfect sense, and simultaneously a none at all. Then it settled, Richard smiled, and it was the smile of nightmares. The smile she saw before the waves crashed. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor, Abby. I hope you'll be happy here." Happy. She was about to live in the same house as the man she saw dying every night. How could she possibly be happy? But she needed the job, needed the money, needed to escape that cramped room in a boarding house where her only company was nightmares. Maybe, just maybe, being near him would help her understand. Maybe she'd finally discover what those dreams meant. Or maybe she'd discover something much worse. If you've ever felt an instant connection with someone, like you've known them from another life, stick around until the end. What's revealed in this story changes everything. Abby started her new job the next day. Her duties were simple: supervise the cleaning, organize the meals, ensure the seaside estate ran perfectly. Richard was an easy employer, polite, kind, almost never home during the day because he spent most of his time at the shipping company's office. But at night, he returned, and every night, Abby had to fight the urge to stare at him, to memorize every feature of his face, to compare him to the man from the nightmares that had haunted her since childhood. They were identical, absolutely identical. In the first week, the nightmares worsened. Now they had more detail. She could see specific clothing, an old pier, a wooden sailing ship, and the name of the ship embroidered in gold. Santa Elena. Santa Elena, her own name. Coincidence, she tried to convince herself. Just a coincidence. But in the second week, something happened that destroyed any possibility of coincidence. Abby was cleaning the attic when she found a wooden box, covered in dust. Inside were old documents, yellowed letters, and at the bottom, a framed oil portrait. The portrait showed a man, Richard Blackwood, but not the Richard she knew, a Richard from another era, wearing 18th century clothing, wearing a captain's hat, with the sea in the background, and behind him, almost hidden in the shadows, there was a woman, a maid, by the uniform, a maid whose face was impossible to deny. It was Abby. She was in the portrait, a portrait from 1750, 275 years ago. Abby dropped the painting as if it were on fire. Her heart raced, her breathing became uneven, and for the first time in her life, she didn't need psychologists to explain her nightmares. They weren't dreams, they were memories. "Are you all right?" The voice came from behind her. Abby turned and faced another person. It wasn't Richard. He was older, harder, with a look that made her profoundly uncomfortable. Marcus Blackwood, the elder brother, the one who lived in the East Wing and rarely appeared. I'm fine." Abby tried to regain her composure. "Just cleaning. Found these old documents." Marcus glanced at the portrait on the floor. His eyes narrowed. "Interesting," he said. "You found the family collection. Those portraits are centuries old. That one there is my great-great-great-grandfather, Richard Blackwood I, founder of the shipping company." "And the woman," Abby asked before she could stop herself, "the woman in the portrait, who is she?" Marcus picked up the painting and looked at it intently. "No one knows for sure. A maid from that time, probably. There's a family legend about her. They say she drowned trying to save the first Richard from a shipwreck. He survived. She didn't. He never recovered. Spent the rest of his life consumed by guilt for not being able to save her." Abby felt the blood run cold in her veins. "Is it true? Is the story true? Who knows?" Marcus shrugged. "Family legends. Every old family has its own. But it is curious. Don't you think? You look remarkably like her. The woman in the portrait could be your twin sister." Before Abby could answer, Marcus returned the painting to the box and left the attic without another word. Abby stood there for a long time, staring at the box, at the portrait that proved the impossible, at the evidence that her nightmares weren't nightmares at all. They were memories of a past life, a life where she had loved Richard Blackwood, a life where she had died trying to save him, a life that now somehow was repeating itself. And if it was repeating itself, it meant that the danger was two: the shipwreck, the drowning, death. Had she returned to finally prevent the tragedy, or was she destined to repeat it? Abby needed to find out before it was too late. What would you do in Abby's place? Would you continue working at the mansion, knowing you might be destined to die there? Or would you flee while you still had time? Comment your answer now. Abby decided to stay, not out of courage, not out of certainty, but out of necessity. She needed to understand, needed to know if she was going insane, or if all of this was real. And the only way to find out was to continue on, to continue observing, to continue searching for answers. In the following weeks, she spent every free moment researching the Blackwood family history. The mansion's library was a treasure trove of old documents, diaries, letters, shipping logs, and the more Abby read, the colder her blood became. The legend that Marcus had mentioned was true, all of it documented. In 1749, Richard Blackwood I had fallen in love with a maid named Abby. The love was forbidden. He was the son of a noble family. She was a nobody, but they loved each other in secret, met in hidden places, made plans to elope together. And then came the storm. Richard had been summoned for a business trip. The ship was the Santa Elena, named after the woman he loved. It departed on an autumn morning, and it should never have returned. A monstrous storm struck the vessel. The mast broke. The hull began to crack, and Richard was thrown into the sea. Abby knew. The documents didn't explain how, but she knew. She ran to the harbor, stole a rowboat, rowed against impossible waves, and when she found Richard floating unconscious, she jumped into the water and dragged him to a rock. He survived. She didn't. A wave took her, and Richard Blackwood, the first Richard Blackwood, spent the remaining 52 years of his life consumed by guilt. He never married, never had children. The fortune and the shipping company passed to his younger brother, who started the lineage. That led to the Richard we know today. But there was something else in those documents, something that made Abby's heart stop. The younger brother, the one who inherited everything. He wasn't innocent. A diary, found decades later, revealed the truth. The brother had sabotaged the ship, had loosened the mast's moorings, had ensured that the storm would do the rest. He wanted the inheritance for himself. He wanted to get rid of Richard, and he almost succeeded. The only thing he didn't foresee was Abby, the housekeeper who loved Richard too much, the woman who sacrificed her life to save the man who should have died. Abby closed the diary, her hands trembling. History was repeating itself. She felt it in every bone in her body. Richard was in danger. Someone wanted to kill him. And if she didn't do something, the tragedy of 1750 would happen again. But who? Who threatened Richard now? The answer came faster than she expected. That very night, Abby had the most detailed nightmare of her entire life. It wasn't just the shipwreck. It was everything, every second, every word. She saw Richard, the first Richard, on the docks, saw his brother approaching with a fake smile, saw the conversation between them, and for the first time, she heard what they said. The brother was convincing Richard to make the voyage, insisting it was urgent, guaranteeing that the ship was in perfect condition, and Richard, too trusting, believed him. Abby, the first Abby, was watching from afar. She had a bad feeling. She tried to warn him, tried to say that something was wrong, but Richard wouldn't listen. Said it was just anxiety, said he'd be back in a week, said he loved her, and he sailed. Abby woke up, screaming, but this time, it wasn't just fear, it was certainty. She knew what had happened in 1750, and she knew what was going to happen again. Marcus, Richard's older brother, the one who lived in the East Wing, the one who had a look that made her feel uneasy, the direct descendant of the treacherous brother from 1750. He was going to kill Richard, exactly like his ancestor had tried to do. Abby needed proof. She couldn't simply accuse her employer's brother of planning a murder. She'd be fired immediately, or worse, committed for insanity. Who would believe a story about past lives and premonitory dreams? She started to observe Marcus discreetly, noting his movements, his phone conversations, his mysterious visits, and what she discovered terrified her. Marcus was deeply in debt. He'd invested his entire share of the inheritance in failed businesses. He owed money to dangerous people, and the only thing that would save him was Richard's death. With his brother gone, he'd inherit everything: the company, the seaside estate, the fortune. But how? Was he planning to do it? How would he repeat the crime of his ancestor? The answer came in a conversation that Abby overheard by chance. She was passing through the hallway when she heard Marcus's voice on the phone. She stopped, leaned against the wall, and listened to every word. Yes, it's all arranged. The boat trip is on Saturday. Richard loves storms, thinks it's poetic to sail in the middle of chaos. The sabotage mechanism is already installed. When we're far enough from the coast, the hull will open, and he can't swim well. Drowning, tragic accident. I inherit everything. Abby covered her mouth to keep from screaming. It was real. It was happening. Marcus was going to kill Richard on Saturday on a boat in the middle of a storm, exactly like in 1750. And today was Thursday. She had 2 days to stop it. But how? Who was going to believe her? A housekeeper accusing the owner's brother of planning a murder based on nightmares about past lives. Abby spent the night sleepless, planning, thinking, trying to find a way out. And then, on Friday morning, something unexpected happened. Richard called her into his office. "Abby, I need to tell you something." She sat in the chair, in front of his desk. Her heart was racing. Did he know? Had he found out? About Marcus? "I've been having strange dreams, Abby," Richard said, "ever since you arrived here. Dreams that don't make sense." Abby felt the air leave her lungs. "What kind of dreams?" "Dreams about you, but not you. Of now. You, from another time. Wearing old clothes, in places I've never seen but seem to know. And at the end of all the dreams, the same thing." "What?" Richard looked her in the eyes, and for the first time, Abby saw something in him that she recognized. Fear, confusion, and a longing impossible to explain. "You die," he said. "You die, trying to save me, and I can never reach you." Abby felt tears streaming down her face without permission. "You dream about it too?" "Since I was 5 years old," Richard replied. "Always the same dream. A woman dying in my arms. A woman that I love more than anything. A woman that I couldn't save. And when I saw you, for the first time, at that interview, I knew it was you, the woman from my dreams, the woman that I lost." "So you believe?" Abby asked. "You believe that we lived before? That we died before?" "I don't know what I believe," Richard admitted. "But I know what I feel. I feel like I've known you for much longer than this life allows. I feel like there's a debt between us, something that was left unfinished. And I feel that something terrible is about to happen." Abby swallowed hard. It was time to tell him everything. "I know what's going to happen," she said. "And I know who is going to do it in the next few hours." Abby told Richard everything. The nightmares, the portrait, the documents about 1750, Marcus's phone conversation, and the plan to sabotage the boat. Richard listened in silence. His face changed from disbelief to shock, from shock to anger, from anger to determination. "My own brother," he said, when Abby finished. "My own blood wants to kill me. He wants your inheritance. He's desperate. And you came to warn me, even knowing that I might not believe you, even risking your job." "Why?" Abby looked him in the eyes. "Because I already died, trying to save you once. And if I have to die again, I will. But this time, I'm going to try to do things differently. This time, I'm going to try to save both of us." Richard stood up, walked over to her, and did something that Abby didn't expect. He took her hand and kissed it. In the instant of the touch, they both saw it, a shared vision. The docks of 1750, the two young lovers. The forbidden love The promise made, then on that last night, "I will find you," the Richard of another era said. "No matter how much time passes, no matter how many lives it takes, I will find you. And when I do find you, I swear I will save you. This time you will not die. I won't allow it." The vision ended. Richard and Abby were back in the office, looking at each other with tears in their eyes. With an absolute certainty of something that transcended logic. They had loved each other before. They had lost each other. And now, finally, they had a chance to do things differently. But first, they needed to survive. If you were in their shoes, what would you do? Would you go to the police with a story of past lives? Or would you try to solve it yourself? Comment your answer, because what comes next will leave you breathless. Richard and Abby spent Friday night planning. They had limited options. Going to the police would mean telling a story that no one would believe. Confronting Marcus directly could be dangerous. He had already shown himself capable of murder. The best option, they decided, was to pretend they knew nothing. Let Marcus think his plan was working, and then, on Saturday, when he tried to execute the sabotage, they would be ready. But there was a problem. Abby still had a fear of water. Absolute terror. The kind of fear that paralyzed you, that took your breath away, that made you feel like you were already drowning just from looking at the sea. "You don't have to go," Richard said. "I can handle this alone. You've already done your part. You warned me. You saved me." "No," Abby replied. "In 1775, I let you go alone. I stayed on the dock waiting. And when I realized something was wrong, it was almost too late. This time, I'm going to be there. By your side, from beginning to end. But your fear, my fear is a memory," Abby interrupted. "It's a reminder of what happened when I tried to save you. But it's also a reminder that I did it. I pulled you out of the water. I kept you alive. Yes, I died afterwards. But you survived. If I did it once, I can do it again." Richard looked at her with a mixture of admiration and awe. "You're the bravest woman I've ever known, in any life." "I am the woman who loves you," Abby corrected. "In all lives." They spent the rest of the night in each other's arms, not making plans, not discussing strategies, just feeling each other's presence, memorizing every second, as if they knew it might be the last time. But it wasn't going to be. Abby wouldn't allow it. This time, the story was going to have a different ending. Some stories shouldn't exist. Some connections shouldn't be possible. But here we are, witnessing two souls that have traversed centuries to find each other again. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the moment. Saturday dawned grey, heavy clouds on the horizon. The sea was choppy, perfect for a storm, perfect for Marcus's plan. Abby woke up before the sun, checked the window. The wind was already strong. The waves crashed against the rocks with a violence that made her tremble. But she wasn't going to back down. Richard was at the harbour when she arrived. Beside him, Marcus, with his fake smile and his calculating eyes. "Well, the housekeeper came to see us off," Marcus sneered. "How sweet." "Actually," Abby said, "I'm going along." Marcus frowned. "You? You can barely look at the sea without turning green. It wouldn't be safe." "I insist." Abby kept her voice steady. "Mr. Blackwood mentioned he would like company, and it's my job to ensure his comfort." Richard nodded. "She's right, I invited her. Problem?" Marcus looked from one to the other. Something in his gaze changed. Suspicion, caution, but he couldn't refuse without raising suspicions. "Of course not," he said finally. "The more the merrier, but don't complain if you get seasick." The boat was modern, large enough for 3 people comfortably, equipped with advanced navigation technology, and, somewhere hidden in the hull, a sabotage mechanism waiting to be activated. Abby boarded first. Her hands were trembling, her stomach was churning, but she forced herself to appear calm, to appear normal, to appear like someone who didn't know she was walking into a trap. Richard boarded next. His eyes met hers for a second, a silent message. I'm here. We're together. It's going to be all right. Marcus was the last. He took command of the helm with the familiarity of someone who knew the vessel well. Of course he did. He had spent weeks planning every detail of the crime. The boat left the harbor, the waves got bigger, the sky darker, the promised storm was coming. And exactly 1 hour after they departed, when they were far enough from the coast that no one could help, Marcus made his move. I think I heard a strange noise in the hull, he said. I'll go check it out. He went down to the boat's hold, where the mechanism was hidden, where he was going to activate the sabotage that would sink the ship and kill his brother. But Richard and Abby were ready. Richard followed Marcus silently. Abby stayed on deck, ready for the emergency that was coming. In the hold, Marcus found the mechanism, a valve that, when opened, would flood the hull in a matter of minutes. His fingers touched the control. His smile widened. He was finally going to have what he deserved. The fortune, the company, everything. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Richard's voice came from behind him. Marcus turned and found his brother blocking the only exit. Richard, what a surprise. What are you doing down here? Preventing you from committing the same crime that our ancestor committed almost 300 years ago. Marcus laughed. What are you talking about? I know everything, Marcus. I know about your debts. I know about the sabotage mechanism. I know that you planned to kill me exactly like the first Richard's brother did. History repeating itself, or trying to repeat itself. Marcus's smile disappeared. His eyes turned cold. You can't prove anything. I have the recording of your phone call, Richard said. Abby heard everything, and at this moment, the Coast Guard is on their way. You've lost, Marcus. This time, the story is going to have a different ending. Marcus lunged forward. Then you leave me no choice. He pulled a knife from his pocket. He advanced on Richard. The space was small. There was nowhere to run. But Richard was prepared. He dodged the first blow, grabbed Marcus's arm. They fought for control of the knife. The boat rocked violently with a larger wave. Both lost their balance, and in that moment, Marcus managed to activate the mechanism. The valve opened. Water began to flood the hold. You're going to die anyway, Marcus snarled. If I can't have anything, you won't either. The fight continued as the water rose. Richard managed to disarm Marcus, but the damage was already done. The boat was sinking, quickly. Abby! Richard shouted. The boat was sinking. She heard him from the deck. Her heart stopped. It was exactly like the nightmare, the shipwreck, the water rushing in, Richard in danger, but this time she was there. This time she could act before it was too late. Abby raced to the life vests, grabbed as many as she could. She went down to the hold where the water was already waist deep on the two men. Richard, catch! She tossed a vest to him. Richard put it on while still struggling to keep Marcus contained. His older brother was in a full-blown panic now. His arrogance had turned to desperation. Help me, Marcus pleaded. I can't swim. Help me. Why should I help you? Richard shouted back. You tried to kill me. But Abby did something unexpected. She threw a vest to Marcus too. In 1750, she said, her voice clear despite the chaos. One brother's hatred destroyed everything. I'm not going to let it happen again. No one dies today, not even you. Marcus grabbed the vest with trembling hands. He didn't understand, couldn't process it. The woman he had underestimated was saving his life. The water was up to their shoulders now. The boat was tilting dangerously. They had seconds before it sank completely. We have to get out, Richard yelled. Now! The three of them scrambled up to the deck. The sea was furious, waves the size of houses, biting wind, and in the distance, lightning illuminating the black sky. It was exactly like Abby's nightmare. The storm, the shipwreck, Richard fighting the waves. But this time, there was a difference. This time, she wasn't on the dock, waiting. This time, She was right beside him. This time they would face it together. "Jump!" Richard screamed. "The boat's going to capsize!" The three of them leaped into the sea. The water was icy. The waves were relentless. Abby felt the ancient terror rise through her body. The memory of dying, the memory of sinking, the memory of letting go of his hand and never surfacing again. But she didn't let go. This time, she held on tight. Richard was right beside her, both wearing vests, both struggling to stay afloat, and Marcus, further away, thrashing in panic. If you haven't felt chills until now, leave a comment saying chills, because what comes next is the moment that changes everything. A gigantic wave formed. Abby saw it and recognized it. It was the wave from the nightmares, the wave that had killed her in 1750, the wave that had dragged her to the bottom while Richard screamed her name. She felt the paralyzing fear, felt her body wanting to give up, felt the memory of death pulling her down, but then she felt something else. Richard's hand, holding hers. "I promised," he shouted against the wind. "I promised that this time I was going to save you. Hold on to me. Don't let go. I'm not going to let you go." The wave crashed down, engulfed them both. For a terrifying moment, Abby felt exactly what she had felt almost 300 years ago. The water rushing into her lungs, the darkness taking over, the certainty of death. But then she felt something different, strong arms pulling her up. Richard, fighting against the current. Richard, keeping the promise he had made in another life. Richard finally saving the woman he had lost. They surfaced together, gasping for air, alive. The storm was still raging, the waves were still attacking. But now, they had something they hadn't had before. Hope. In the distance, lights were approaching. The Coast Guard, the rescue that Richard had activated before they left, the plan they had made, working perfectly. "We're saved," Abby whispered. "We're alive." Richard hugged her in the middle of the raging sea. "I told you," he said, "this time I wasn't going to let you die. This time I was going to save you." And he did. After almost 300 years, he finally fulfilled his promise. The rescue arrived minutes later. 3 people were pulled from the sea, 3 people who should have died, 3 people who had defied the destiny that history was trying to repeat. Marcus was the first to be pulled out. He was in shock, trembling, unable to look at the brother he had tried to kill. The Coast Guard handcuffed him as soon as they reached the port. The evidence was irrefutable. The recording of the call, the sabotage mechanism found in the wreckage. Richard and Abby's testimony. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, the same 20 years that his ancestor should have gotten in 1750 if justice had been served back then. In a way, it was cosmic justice, finally collecting a debt from almost 300 years ago. But for Richard and Abby, the story was just beginning. In the days following the rescue, Abby's nightmares stopped. For the first time since she was 5 years old, she slept through the night without waking up screaming, without seeing Richard drowning, without feeling the water rushing into her lungs. The dreams she had now were different. They were dreams of peace, dreams of love, dreams of a long life beside the man who had crossed centuries to find her again. And 1 week after the shipwreck, Richard called her for a conversation. "Abby, I need to ask you something." They were in the garden of the seaside estate. The sea was roaring in the background, but now the sound didn't frighten her anymore. Now it was just a reminder that she had won, that they had won. "We've only known each other a short time in this life," Richard began, "but I feel like I've known you for centuries, because it's true. We have known each other for centuries. We've loved each other for centuries, and I lost you centuries ago." Abby felt tears forming in her eyes. "I don't want to waste any more time," he continued. "We've already waited almost 300 years. We've already died once. We've already been through a literal and figurative storm. I don't want to wait even one more day." Richard knelt before her and pulled a velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, not just any ring, an ancient ring, with an inscription worn by time. This ring belonged to the first Richard, he explained. He had it made for the Abbey of 1750. He was going to give it to her when he returned from the voyage. But he never returned. He was never able to give it to her. The ring was kept in the Blackwood family for almost 300 years. Waiting, Abby looked at the ring, at the inscription, and even worn as it was, she could read the words, "In all lives." Richard took her hand. "Abby, you saved me in 1750. You warned me about Marcus. You faced your greatest fear to be by my side. You are the bravest, most loyal, most extraordinary woman I have ever known, in any life." She was crying now, tears of joy, of relief, of love. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you spend the rest of this life by my side, and all the lives that come after?" Abby's answer wasn't in words. It was a kiss that contained 300 years of waiting, 300 years of longing, 300 years of unlived love. "Yes," she whispered, when they finally parted. 1,000 times, yes, in every life. Richard placed the ring on her finger, the ring that the first Richard had made for the first Abbey. Finally, reaching their destiny, finally fulfilling their purpose. And in that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, over the sea that had almost claimed them both, something magical happened. They both saw it, a final vision, a vision of peace. The docks of 1750, Richard and Abby, the first ones. But this time, the scene was different. This time, there was no storm, no shipwreck, no death. They stood together, hand in hand, watching the sunset. Identical rings gleamed on their fingers, and they were smiling. "You did it," the ancient Richard said, to some point beyond time. "You finally did what I could not. You saved her. We did it together," the ancient Abbey replied. "Finally, we did it together." The vision dissolved, and Richard and Abby, the ones who were here now, stood in silence for a long moment. "You saw it?" Richard asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I saw it. They're at peace now. We are at peace now." Abby smiled, a smile free of fear, free of pain, free of nightmares. "Yes, we finally are. This story is almost over. But before I go, I need to tell you what happened next, because some stories deserve a complete ending. In the days following the proposal, Abby and Richard faced an important decision. The Blackwood estate had been the stage for so much pain. Marcus's betrayal, the murder plot, the memories of 1750. Could they possibly build a happy future in a place with such a dark past? It was Abby who provided the answer. "We're not going to run from the past," she said, with a newfound strength in her voice. "We're going to transform it. This estate has seen darkness. It's true. But it's also seen love. It's seen sacrifice. It's seen two souls who traversed centuries to find each other again. Let's make it a symbol of what's possible when love wins." Richard agreed. And together, they began the transformation. First, they opened the family archives to historians, the documents about 1750, the diary that revealed the sabotage, the love letters between the first Richard and the first Abby. Everything was catalogued, preserved, and eventually transformed into a public exhibition on the history of the Blackwood Shipping Company and the secrets that old families kept. Then, they created a foundation, the Abby Blackwood Foundation, in honor of the woman who had given her life to save the man she loved. The foundation offered scholarships to young people from underprivileged backgrounds, exactly like Abby had been before she became a housekeeper. Young people who deserved a chance to change their stories. And finally, they renovated the estate, not to erase the past, but to honor it. The room where Abby had slept in her first weeks, the housekeeper's room, was transformed into a memorial. A plaque on the door told the story, and everyone who visited the estate could understand what that place represented. Richard also made an important discovery during the renovation. In the basements of the property's docks, in an area that no one had touched for decades, he found something that made his heart stop. A chest. Inside the chest were belongings of the first Abbey, simple but preserved clothing, a Bible with notes scribbled in the margins, and a letter she had written to Richard the night before the shipwreck, a letter that was never delivered. "My love," the letter read, "I know you will leave tomorrow, and I know that something is wrong. I can feel it in my bones. I can feel it in the air. I can feel it in the way your brother looks at you. Please, don't go. Please, stay. Please, choose our simple life instead of this risky voyage. But I know you will go anyway, because you are honorable, because you fulfill your obligations, because you are the man I love. So, if you must go, know one thing, I will be waiting. No matter how long it takes, no matter what happens, I will be waiting for you. In this life or the next. Forever yours, Abby." Richard read the letter to Abby on a quiet evening. They both wept. They wept for the first Abby, who never had her love reciprocated in life. They wept for the first Richard, who spent 50 years burdened by guilt for a death that was not his fault. And they wept with gratitude for having had the chance and to do things differently. The letter was framed, placed next to the portrait, another piece of the almost 300-year-old puzzle, finally finding its place. The wedding was held 2 months later at the same estate where it had all begun, overlooking the same sea that had witnessed the tragedy of 1750. But this time, the sea was calm, the sky was clear, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of waves against the rocks. Abby wore the simplest dress she could find. She wanted nothing ostentatious, nothing that would make her seem different from who she was, an ordinary woman who had lived an extraordinary story. Richard was waiting at the makeshift altar in the garden. His eyes never left hers as she walked down the flower-strewn aisle. And when the officiant asked if she took him as her husband, the answer came without hesitation. "I do, in every life." The reception was small. Only the closest friends, the estate staff, who had become family, and at the head table, a framed photo, the portrait found in the attic, the first Richard and the first Abby, finally having a place of prominence, finally being honored. That night, Richard and Abby spent hours watching the sea from the bedroom balcony. "Are you still afraid?" Richard asked. "No," Abby replied. "The fear was a memory of pain, but now I have new memories, memories of you saving me, memories of us surviving together. The fear has been replaced by love, and the nightmares? Gone, completely. I think they were a warning, a way to prepare me for what was to come. And now that I've fulfilled my mission, now that we've saved each other, I don't need to be warned anymore. We're safe." Richard embraced her tightly. "I've spent my whole life dreaming of you dying," he said. "I woke up every night feeling like I'd failed, that I hadn't been able to save you, that it was my fault." "I know," Abby whispered. "I had the same dreams, only from the other side. But now it's over." "Now it's over," she agreed. "Finally over." They remained silent for a long time, just listening to the sea, just feeling each other's presence, just existing together. The years passed. Richard and Abby had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, each one born with a small birthmark on their right shoulder, a mark shaped like an anchor, the same mark that Abby had on her back since she was born. They grew up hearing the story, the tale of the first Abby and the first Richard, The story of a shipwreck, the story of a love that transcended centuries. And each of them, in different ways, carried this story with them. The eldest son became a historian. He dedicated his life to researching the Blackwood family, documenting each generation, each tragedy, each triumph. His book about the legend of the first abbey became a respected academic reference. The middle son became a sailor, not ironically, but out of love for the sea. The same sea that had almost claimed his parents' lives. He said he felt a connection to the waters, as if something very ancient within him needed to make peace with the ocean. And the youngest daughter became a psychologist, specializing in dreams. She spent her whole life trying to understand how her mother's nightmares could be memories of a past life. She never reached a satisfactory scientific conclusion, but she never stopped believing. Each of the children at some point in their lives had a different kind of dream. They weren't nightmares like their mothers. They were dreams of peace, dreams where they saw the first Richard and the first Abby together, happy, waving, as if giving thanks, as if finally able to rest because someone had finished what they could not. The eldest granddaughter, daughter of the historian, was born on the same day of the year that the first Abby had died. Back in 1750, coincidence, some said, but the family knew that there were no coincidences in this story. She was christened Abby, the third Abby, and from a young age showed an inexplicable affinity with the water. She swam as if she had been born in the sea, as if she were recovering something that had been lost a long time ago. Years later, this same granddaughter found an old diary hidden in a false wall in the attic. The diary belonged to the first Abby. Pages and pages of her thoughts, her dreams, her forbidden love for the young Richard, and in the end, a final note written on the night before the shipwreck. "I had a dream," she wrote, "a dream different from all the others. I dreamt that I woke up in another time, in another body, and he was there. Richard was there, and this time we survived. This time love wins. I don't know if it's a dream or a vision of the future, but if it's true, if one day there is another Abby and another Richard, I want them to know it was worth it. Every second loving him was worth it, and I would do it all again." The family framed that page and placed it next to the original portrait. One more proof that the first Abby's dreams were also prophetic. She had seen the future, had seen her spiritual descendants finally living the love that she could not. The Blackwood seaside estate became a place of pilgrimage for people who believed in past lives, couples who felt inexplicable connections, people who had repetitive dreams they couldn't understand. They all wanted to see the place where two souls finally reunited. Richard and Abby always greeted them personally. They told the story, showed the documents, and in the end, they said the same thing. Pay attention to your dreams. They may be more than dreams. They may be memories, they may be maps, they may be the key to finding the person you lost in another life. When Abby turned 70, Richard organized a celebration. 40 years of marriage, 40 years since that day at sea. 40 years since they had finally broken the cycle. The party was at the same mansion, in the same garden, overlooking the same sea. And when it came time for speeches, Richard stood up. "When I was a child," he began, "I had nightmares every night. I dreamt of a woman I loved, dying in my arms, and I woke up feeling that I had failed, that it was my fault, that I owed her something that I could never repay." The guests listened in silence. "I spent decades not understanding these dreams. I thought it was trauma. I thought it was madness. I thought it was just something in my head. Until I met Abby." He looked at her, at the woman he had loved for longer than this life allowed. "Abby showed me that the dreams weren't madness. They were memories. Memories of a life we had lived together almost 300 years ago, a life where she died saving me, a life where I made a promise that I couldn't keep." Tears streamed down Abby's face now. But in this life, I kept it. In this life, I finally saved her. In this life, love won, and there is nothing in this world or in any other that makes me more grateful than to have had the chance to do it differently. He raised a glass. To Abby, my wife, my soulmate, my queen, in all lives. Everyone toasted, and Abby, between tears and smiles, finally understood why she had been born with those nightmares, why she had suffered 26 years of sleepless nights, why her body had always been afraid of the sea. It was all to bring her here, to Richard, to this moment, to the happy ending that they had deserved for almost 300 years. The nightmares weren't a curse. They were a map, a guide that led her exactly where she needed to be. And now that she had arrived, now that she was where she should be, she could finally rest. Abby died at 83, sleeping, with a smile on her face, without nightmares for the first time since she was a child. Richard followed her 6 months later. The doctor said it was his heart. But the children knew the truth. He simply didn't want to live without her, didn't want to wait another 300 years to meet her again. They were buried together in the garden of the seaside estate, overlooking the sea, and on the tombstone, a single inscription: Abby and Richard Blackwood, together in all lives. On the day of the funeral, something extraordinary happened. The sea, which had been rough all week, became completely calm. Not a wave, not a ripple, as if the ocean itself was in mourning, as if it was finally making peace with the two souls that it had almost taken so many times. The grandchildren say that on that day, they saw something on the horizon, a vision that lasted only seconds. Two figures holding hands, walking on the water towards the sunset. A man and a woman, dressed in clothes from another era, looking back one last time before disappearing. The third Abby, the granddaughter who was named in honor of the first, swore until the end of her life that she saw them both waving and smiling as if they could finally depart in peace. The Blackwood seaside estate still exists, still receives visitors, still keeps the documents, the portraits, the diaries, and still, according to some employees, is visited by the spirits of Richard and Abby on full moon nights, not as hauntings, not as frightening ghosts, but as guardians, protectors of the love that they fought so hard to win. Some of the housekeepers whisper about hearing laughter echoing from the gardens late at night. Others claim to catch the scent of flowers wafting through the West Wing hallway, and every one of them, without exception, speaks of an inexplicable peace they feel while inside the estate, a peace that simply doesn't exist anywhere else. The story of Abigail Abbey and Richard Blackwood has become a local legend. Parents tell it to their children, grandparents recount it for their grandchildren, and with each retelling, the story seems to gather another detail, another miracle, another testament to the fact that true love knows no bounds, not even death. Have you ever had a dream so vivid, so real, it felt like a memory? Have you ever felt an unexplainable connection, a deep resonance with someone you've just met? Have you ever woken up with tears in your eyes and you haven't a clue why? Maybe, just maybe, it's not just a dream. Perhaps it's a message, a warning perhaps, or maybe a map trying to guide you to a place, to someone special. Don't ignore those dreams. They might just hold the key to the love of your life. Share your story in the comments below. Have you ever had a dream like that? Have you ever felt like you knew someone from a past life? We want to hear what you have to say, and if this video resonated with you in any way, please share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this, someone who is also searching, someone who is also waiting, because true love does exist. It transcends lifetimes, it conquers death, it weathers the fiercest storms, and it always finds a way.